This is not an invitation to suffering and pain. The greatest characteristics of the Spiritist doctrine is to sow comfort, liberation from suffering and pain. But it's an invitation for courage, because in fact, I was joking with my kids. You think that to be born, to be a plant over the windows, even the plant endures storms. So Spiritist doctrine has come. His first characteristic is to fulfill the promise of Jesus of Nazareth, which is to bring all of us the joy of living, the courage to face our difficulties, the discernment to understand that problems are just a part, as Bezerra Jimenez says, a part of the solution. That we would never walk 1 millimeter if we didn't have to face challenges that come in our way in many ways. But also in the Spiritist literature, they touch us. One of the novels by André Luiz, which tells us that if we endure with courage, we will find the support of everybody. This could be characterized by the trust in God. And when Spiritism comes, Kardec answers in the Spiritist Review, when he makes a comparison between the Druid philosophy and Spiritism, he says that both, it was already Spiritism. It was the same truth. 860 years. The Celtics but the Spiritist priests at the time that bring the truth, who present the invisible world, and as the spiritual world, the possibility of communication between incarnates and discarnates, the possibility of presenting ourselves with an energetic body after death. Consequently, so in 860 years before Kardec's coming, Jesus was already sending to the earth the Druid priests in order to work and understand the truth. We are in a school, earth school, a beautiful school. We are all equal, as Paul of Tarsus says, Jewish, Greek, Romans, white, yellow, black, red, blue, it doesn't matter. One is greater than the other. No one is better than the other. It is through reincarnation, this wonderful law, that we understand the differences. But there's a very beautiful song in the Radio Boa Nova that says, we are all different, but we are all the same. And it is true. The differences that make us equal doesn't prevent us from having a psychic skeleton that makes us brothers and sisters, children of the same Father, destined to light for all of us. No one will be left alone or outside. A poet said, whether we want it or not, God will make us mature. But Spiritism is considered the third revelation. To reveal is to remove the veil that covers a truth from the above. The first revelation is Moses, the great missionary, already tried to conduct us to the light, but he himself got lost a few times in the name of his time that he lived in. Was a man that presented a violent God. But it was a magnificent individual that through his mediumship of an ostensive nature, he brought the divine constitution, simplified for those who understand. No kill, don't steal, honor father and mother, don't commit adultery, don't raise false witness. And had we heeded the call of Moses, we would already be in higher dimensions, in light, fulfilled with light. But we are happy on earth because we develop ourselves and having the opportunity to understand the roadmap of love through the teachings of Jesus. And in this presentation of the wise man from Lyon, Allan Kardec, there isn't someone within moral authority in order to modify the earth, because not a single individual before or after Jesus is the greatest. And then Kardec had the same spiritual assistance from the Spirit of Truth. This staff of spirits were very wise and were directed by Jesus of Nazareth. That's why Kardec's work is magnificent, which doesn't prevent that traditional science can grow and to get to the comprehension of the spirit, that we are spirits, that we are divine sparks, that we are light. We do have the divine essence, the divine gene. Our thought is a modifying force that changes situations. But in general, the first problem, in the first problem, we start thinking in wrong ways. And since our thought is a powerful force, it attracts like a magnet similar thoughts. And woe to those who think badly. Woe to those who enter the darkness road of apathy, disenchantment, because this road makes our problems grow. So Jesus advised, Moses acted violently upon his people in order to awaken the courage, this inner force that must turn to the good so that we can overcome the problems. So Moses realized the work with a lot of strength. Thank you. Many times we get enchanted by praising gods that were more cruel than ourselves. Look at our psychic state at the time of being children with profound needs. The second revelation was incredible. Since we were facing many challenges that we are facing like today, imagine more than 2,000 years ago, amongst the Jews in Greece, in Rome, they were abandoned. The ones going through leprosy in the valleys, abandoned without any consideration, not valuing women. So Jesus watches over us, that is considered the spiritual director of the earth, decided in an act of sublime love and profound admiration, he came to earth to wear the body of flesh, precisely so that he could feel in some way what we were feeling, so that he could show us courage in the moments of trial, and much more. Always the concern with the neighbor. So the second revelation should have fulfilled this role in a divine way, liberating from the primal conditions. There is a book where a philosopher says that we remain as primates, using conspiracy, but we are magnificent beings. It's such a shame that we've forgotten about it. So this is the invitation that Jesus gave us. We will fulfill this world as we expand this love to our neighbors and loving ourselves, forgiving in a conscious and unconscious way what happened to our past. It doesn't help to go deep in our mistakes. It's to paralyze ourselves in the evolutionary spiral. Herculano Pires, the philosopher, said in the book, we stay there deep in ourselves. What did I do? I did that wrong. Let's get rid of that. We're not the center of the universe. We barely know how our physical body operates, especially our brain. Humility and gratitude establishes a luminous channel that permits the help from the higher spirituality. Vanity, arrogance works the opposite, creates blockages, which prevents us from understanding the truth within our abilities, evolutionary abilities. So we didn't really understand Jesus, and he knew that. So he knew us profoundly from a long time. Of course, that great individuals in the demonstration of all those who sacrificed themselves understood Jesus and went to beautiful dimensions. They came to earth as great missionaries in order to continue the help, such as Mother Teresa, Sister Dulce, Doctors Without Borders, Bezerra Jimenez. It's an army of light with whom we can connect through the presence in the Spiritist house, in these oases of peace. Sometimes human beings create lightning and thunder. I come from a Spiritist family. Every family needs to watch and pray. But this oasis of peace, it creates a possibility of connection with the transforming forces of the earth through work, love, and goodness. Because the transforming forces through the hearts, when we allow the evil ones to dominate the earth, then those forces can also act with a lot of efficiency, but profoundly painful. So Herculano reminds us, nobody, if you want to be judged, but nobody is judged in the higher planes, but if you want to be judged in the lower spheres, that happens. But that's a temporary stage, a creation of ourselves through our thoughts, which forms groups, just like the earth. We form groups according to our affinity of thoughts. So these groups, they decided to call them umbra, or the lower regions, the lower spheres, or the. So we had to understand the understanding. As we change ourselves for the better, through telepathy we begin to form groups that connect us with this growth. We don't understand Jesus, but he brought many other messengers like Buddha that called us for the moral development, that called us for detachment, that said that the earth is pain because man surrenders himself to desires, because they always live desiring, because they're not content with anything. And only we exterminate pain on earth when we finish our desires. Emmanuel says, be careful what you desire, because it not always is the best for you. Sometimes what we desire is precisely that's going to make us unhappy. So the Our Father prayer, which is our brother Jesus, asks, Father, deliver us from the evil. We are the builders of our destiny. There is no way for us to complain about God or the previous reincarnation or how difficult things were when we are elements of transformations of ourselves, of our family, and we have the aid of the Spiritist house for this work. But the Buddhists also have the aid. The philosophers also provide the same invitation to moral development. What would be this moral development? Discipline, 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 as Emmanuel says to Chico. To express oneself within an ethics, Spiritist ethics, the ethic of beauty, the ideal behavior to express oneself in the ethics of light, of beauty, of spiritual growth. And Jesus synthesized it with the simplicity that he embodied of the wise man. Those sages and the wise could have actually complicated this, but he was very simple, objective. To love your neighbor as yourself and God above all things. To respect our own physical body as ourselves. Respect. We resort to Moses. Don't envy. Don't get vain. It's so simple, this lesson, that we're unable. Because so many times, many friends tell us, I don't know how to talk about the gospel. I only talk about science, thinking that's a quality. There's no such thing. Science opens itself to philosophy. And philosophy opens itself to the reconnect from religion. Reconnect. Kardec presents us the invisible world, which already existed, which was acting upon us, and many times was disturbing us so much as we got disturbed ourselves. And Kardec said, if this invisible world exists, then we need to get to know it. We need to know, relatively speaking, the laws and the rules that operate. We need to know how to defend ourselves, because the needs of this invisible world, so that we can allow the help from the more advanced spiritual world. So it's clear that people that like to talk about difficult things, they say, from the study of the invisible world, from those that accepted a change in mindset. This change in mindset of behavior expresses itself in the life of those that are spiritists. But the philosophy projects itself in the universe, and it's going to study God, the theology, God, the spiritual world, the laws that dictate it. That's Spiritist theology. That means reconnect. Religion was never filled with rituals. The Gospels say religion is reconnect, to connect again with God. But what is the Spiritist religion? It's prayer, it's the passes, the disobsession meetings, the invitation to the better thoughts. That's Spiritist religion. The Spiritist religion of truth presented by Jesus of Nazareth. So we didn't really understand Jesus, like we didn't understand Socrates. But if we're here, many of us, in this wonderful school and planet, not better or worse than the advanced brothers and sisters of the universe, we're just in development stage, in growing stage. So if we're here, we need to get to know these truths which appear amongst the philosophers, the existential ones, the traditional ones, the spiritual, as the need to understand ourselves, connect ourselves through telepathy with physical and extra-physical minds. So that's the great change. But in the time and space, didn't reincarnation exist? It existed. That in the, like I'm promoting my dad's book here. I swear I'm not promoting his book. I'm just saying that these books inspire me. The gospel that touches us, that makes us apt to think in a more ethical way. And then the Spirit's book, the medium's book, Heaven and Hell. And if we are in this convergence of magnificent minds that are physical and non-physical, then we need to get to know how they interact. What do they think? What are the types that in our current stage of evolution, which is, in a way a bit of a decadence, because let us be humble, because humility connects us with the source. Who are they? Where do we find precious information about this? In the books, the Medium's book and Heaven and Hell. In the Medium's book, the simplicity appears in all its splendor. There is no complication. One lady told me, "Oh, I want something a little more sophisticated." I said, "No, but if you're not going to understand even the easy, do you want something more complex?" Because the easy actually demands much more mental work than the sophisticated. In the Medium's book, there's an invitation to growth in a very educational way, which the majority understands. So we studied as early as 9 years old. So we tell the story of those girls that suddenly felt a disturbance in their homes. The clothes began to appear torn and thrown about. And so they asked that they evoke this spirit in the Parisian Spiritist Society, this entity that was causing all this ruckus. And the spirit manifested itself and said, "They disturbed me because they were bullying me. They were in the window, ruffling. They were on the window, mistreating and chiding the passerbys." So he wasn't able to overcome them, and he came down to disturb them. So everyone likes these horror films and thrillers that revengeful spirits come, and they forget that good always overcomes evil. Any shadow is exterminated by light. And we are gods and lights within ourselves. We are capable to produce lights through prayer. Johotcher, the spirit who also travels in many places, he tells us that in the moments of great disturbances, we elevate a prayer in a sincere way, in a heartfelt way, and the entities that are disturbed are helped and taken to the places not of punishment, but of education and correction. As much as good parents today educate their children in order to become useful individuals to society. And in the book Heaven and Hell, Kardec's work is deeper. He's a pioneer in presenting the research of the existence of the afterlife. In all his work, more than 1,000 mediums collaborated all over the planet. And in the medium's book, when he makes a small mistake, they knock on the wall until he makes the meeting, and they warn him where the page is found in order to remove the page, in order to correct it. So one of these days I met a friend that wanted to review everything. Maybe you need to renovate yourself in the doctrine. Read a little more to understand the grandeur of the work of Kardec. In the book Heaven and Hell, he talks about the individuals that lived, that Buddha said, who detached themselves. Not that they lived in dire poverty, but it was not to be enslaved of the earth, not to trade the goods of the earth from the goods of our family, not to act in a way that fills the whole barn with seeds and says, "Now my soul can rest." He said, "Fool, this very night your soul will be called back to the Father, and what are you going to do with all the goods that you've accumulated?" I was in a friend's house, and they were showing me a channel of Spiritist comedy where the man that was very concerned, a businessman, at this time Death comes to call him and he begs, "Please, Death." And Death says, "I'll give you 5 days." And in those 5 days, he wanted to take his wife with love and show her around town. So he wanted to change completely. So it's good for us to always prepare ourselves to death in the way of the Franciscan monks. Every morning they would knock on the door and say, in order to get up in the morning, "Brother, remind yourself of death," or "remember death." So it must be important for us to remember that life is a beautiful passage. I don't want to die. I'm very young, but the time will come when this passage will take place. So when we say, hey, I could have done this, I could have done that. So let's do the best we can. Let's not get neurotic. Well, what I was able to do, I did. Okay, what I couldn't, I'll do it in the next reincarnation. Maybe not in same circumstances. So, happy spirits is invitation to the active goodness. So the Countess Paula, Samuel, Philippe, these spirits, they say that when they left their physical body, is like leaving a dark tent and project themselves in a crystal palace that was full of light. That's worth it. I would even be happy to project myself in that spiritual colony of Nasular, which is a colony for spirits that are delayed in their march. But they have a great kitchen, great houses there. Or even project myself in a Spiritist house. So I'd like to affiliate myself so that I can have a place to go to afterwards. So we have a family. We need to take care of our family members. So this Countess Paul was a very rich, beautiful, and happy woman. Wow, she was rich, beautiful, and happy? Really? And she's still rich, beautiful, and happy? That's not fair. She's a very noble spirit that evolved. The superior spirits explain she never badmouthed anybody. Wow, look at that. It's very hard for a group to spend 5 minutes without bad-mouthing somebody. She was married with a nobleman. She supported her husband in his life, in society. But she also had her volunteer work, which we call supplements, food to the poor families in Paris. So she was an example. She died at the age of 37, and in beautiful conditions. She continues to be rich, beautiful, and happy, because the wealth is not just money, intellectual wealth. Wealth in the ability to love. Wealth in the ability to be a great housewife, like the old matrons that were able to raise 10, 15 children. The wealth of great businessmen in the way of providing jobs to so many people, calling for the growth of the earth. This is the type of wealth of having a heart that develops itself in goodness, in the example of St. Francis of Assisi, loving God above all things and all the brothers and sisters. At that time, he considered his brothers and sisters also the animals, the birds and the plants, which today's science, traditional science, gives confirmation of that, showing that their DNA of the monkey, for example, and the pig, is 98% similar of our DNA. And they even say many times, they say that because they walk in the narrow path of instinct, which prevents us from acting in a bad way. The individual of the earth, however, thanks to the intelligence that opens a field of possibilities of choice, sometimes loses itself, sometimes surrenders himself. I saw a very famous lawyer, an important person in the defense of human rights, and he was hitting his wife. He could have gone straight to a hospital to do some disobsession session in a center. And it is to avoid these problems that prevents us from being, after we disincarnate, like a Countess Paula or Samuel Filippi. The spirit of Samuel Filippi wrote, as soon as he died, he delivered a message that he asked to be read at his funeral. And the message said the following: the existence of life after death, but in the need to act according to the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. How to not know this magnificent world, that is all around us, that have always influenced us, that was already doing materialization sessions, like Ernesto Bozzano in his book Supranormal Manifestations. And Herculano presents this book, The Spirit and the Time. They knew how to choose the medium with a mediumistic mandate. Medium is that who in some way has an influence in the spiritual world. So we are all mediums. We can withdraw the influences that are less pleasant and bring the ones that are more pleasant. But there are the mediums that come with missions or mandates, very specific, to act in such ways to bring information from the spirit world. And these mediums were chosen by the shamans, by the tribe chiefs. They were in a cave, in a more difficult life, until they would be able to achieve some kind of paranormal phenomenon. It was asked that they would levitate somebody usually, and they would be able to do so. The same way of the Tibetan monks. I don't remember his name, Alexander. It's a truth that comes from all the centuries that we still doubt sometimes and no one understands. And Kardec shows us in the heaven and hell the spirits with challenges. For example, the spirit Clara, a woman that came from the high society of Paris, and through the medium's communication, she complained that she was in a terrible desert, and she walked, and she's hungry, she's thirsty for a long time, and she can't find an exit. So she herself recognizes, as she's aided by the higher spirits, she says, I know why. I never loved somebody. I didn't love my husband who was good. I didn't love my children or friends. She had autistic tendencies. She needed treatment, but she continued her life in that way. She thought she loved herself, but she really didn't. So she said, now I know that I created a desert and that my heart still is in this desert. I know that if I come back, she was already being assisted in the spiritual world. I know that if I come back, I will have to still walk in a desert. One time a friend of mine had this desire to get married so badly, so she wrote a letter to the medium Givaldo. Poor Givaldo. And Givaldo, with all the love and delicacy and sensitivity, I'm not going to tell the name, he wrote the letter back to her. Dear friend, you created for yourself the karma of loneliness. It's nobody's fault, it's your own. You could extinguish and make it lessened, yes. But she closed herself again. She was alone again. She wanted somebody, but according to her own ways. And the greatest secret of a good relationship is to accept the one as he is or she is. So then they work themselves to improve. So it's so rational, this beautiful doctrine, that I asked myself, how have we not been able to understand this in practice? In theory, we can all get very enchanted by it. Oh, good, Jesus said, I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick, for the ill, the tired, the overburdened. But when a problem comes, all of them forget, and we think Jesus is not going to help me. In order for me to be a spiritist, spiritist is for the healthy and the sick. And that's the greater characteristic of the spiritist revelation. The other day, in a debate on TV, they said Spiritism likes an elite. And I said, I didn't want to say this to my friend, but I'm saying, what kind of nonsense is this? there are some from the elite that all they wreak havoc. The biggest confusions actually come from the empty elite. And then they're very simple people that through many reincarnations have been able to develop a wisdom that many of us haven't possessed yet. So Spiritism has come for all. Paul of Tarsus understood the message of Jesus. It didn't just come for the elitist people, the Jewish people. That people deserved the coming of God because of their belief in the one God. But Christianity and Spiritism has come for all and has reached all. And above all, after the demonstration of Jesus, of the existence of life after death, it spread in many colors, and we still don't understand. Then here comes the second promise of God, which is the work of Kardec, which is such a objective and simple work, so well elaborated. Who wants more information? There's a book that which is a book that the woman that studied this is a woman that was a contemporary of Kardec and wrote 4 books about it. When they got married, Kardec was not chosen randomly. He had tremendous humility. He said, if I was not able to carry on this work, somebody else was going to do it. To have this ability of this ex-Druid priest that reincarnates itself. So the Druids, as a Druid priest, he was one of the more sane Druid priests. Between the Tibetan monks, there's the dangerous ones, the ones that fly at night, that actually frighten people. But Kardec was amongst the great priests, the Druid priests, and was chosen because he had the courage to face challenges, ridicule. They said he was insane, and he had the courage. That's to say, Spiritism is proven. Spiritist facts. Here we are today in a Spiritist house. We're different from other religions. We're not asking for something specific. No one comes here to ask to win the lotto. Nobody comes here to change the car to a better car. But please ask for the courage to work and to help with the excesses, to help some charitable institution. And which institution can that be? Children, elderly. That's the Spiritist characteristic of the Spiritist, to be concerned about the needs of others. And we see somebody that said that never found so many charitable institutions in his life than amongst the Spiritists. And woe to Brazil if the Spiritists were to close their orphanages, these elderly care hospitals and daycares. A lot of social assistance would be lacking. But Kardec says in the Gospel that the key is charity. That's the key to progress. That's a characteristic of Spiritism. And charity is done through simple acts. My friend says, I don't have time for charity. Well, you can do charity. Begin by doing charity to your husband. They didn't speak with each other in 3 months. Then talk to your friend. You need treatment. I had to say, you need some kind of spiritual treatment. I wanted to help her. But people want the great feats, the great acts, and maybe there's a dog next to them that's hurt. Take it to the vet. Find online somebody that can adopt the pet or give it to an organization. Have the patience to a child that is in need, and please treat in a civilized way your partner, your spouse. You, the choice is in our mind. But don't complain if you keep switching and trying out different ones. Oh, what did I do in a previous lifetime to deserve this? Well, think of the present. I told this to a friend of mine that came from Saudi Arabia. I said, listen, please, go treat yourself because there's a problem here. And then he didn't understand. He enrolled in 2 courses in Spiritism. I said, don't worry, just do one. He now resolved that he's no longer a great sheikh from Saudi Arabia and a millionaire to have so many wives. Everything is part of utilizing the faith, the reasoned faith, as Kardec said. About faith, I found a book by Herculano. He has 100 written books about research. Of course I'm going to find it there, considering that they're all around me, so forgive me if I keep quoting him. My father used to publish this magazine. He would write a name, but all the 5 authors from the magazine were him. So he's starting to find people to collaborate with. In this book, Introduction to Spiritist Philosophy, there's a beautiful chapter called Critical Fidelity, which explains faith and reason. I got enchanted by it. What is reason? Reason is the file, the archive that we develop through experiences in many reincarnations. We're going to learn as we go. They are so well presented by Socrates, the philosopher. If you don't the concept of the soul, if you don't get the concept, these concepts will form an archive that will be enriching us in our ability to communicate ourselves. But at each incarnation, the one who reincarnates needs to stimulate himself in order to blossom and again what he has learned in the past, so that what he also endured as the worst can also be quiet. That's the evangelization work. So next to reason there is faith, which is the desire for justice, the development of courage, of empathy with our fellow men. Faith is a light that illuminates us. But if we're just immersed in faith without developing reason, we will become religious fanatics, or fanatics of anything, for sports, or so like if they have a fan of somebody, then they change his team, because sometimes they kill in the name of something that changes. And faith needs to count with the aid of reason, and we Spiritists know that. When we don't understand concepts, it's tough to understand Spiritism, even a song. And Socrates used to say, he used to teach through questioning in a concept. In the Republic, when he wanted, a young man wanted to find the truth for himself, he would question him endlessly. So mercy, faith means that. So faith and reason, he says, faith and reason are in every psyche. Faith and reason need to hold hands around the will, which is this impulse that may allow us to, in one incarnation, improve tremendously through the impulse of reason with faith, because will can also be badly utilized if there is not faith and reason next to it. The will can direct itself to find happiness in drugs. Will can direct itself to concern itself with richness without the essential needs. So faith and reason with the will to propel is allow us to walk towards the light without much suffering, without building through painful reincarnations. There was somebody that got injured because they practiced radical sports. So he told me, now I'm gonna think what I'm going to do next in my radical sport. And I said to myself, I give up. Let's wait for another reincarnation. But here we are this way in the little things. We have this path that we create for ourselves. There's a hole, and we go until we fall, and then we go, oh my God, what did I do in the last lifetime to deserve? Well, nothing. You just didn't watch your stuff in this life. We understand the art of living well, because even is found in songs. I love the singer Roberto Carlos through the songs. Like Maura Mary, give me your hands, take care of my heart. And he says, it is needed to know how to live. I think it's his song, right? It's needed, we need to know how to live, because to know how to live, we will be happy. To know how to live, we will be able to understand Spiritism, or panic attack, or bad habits, unhappiness, depression, prevents our discernment. Everybody knows young people that are very well prepared that go to the college entrance exam, and the sibling that wasn't able to study. So the fear of making a mistake causes more mistake. Prudence is one thing. I always say, I was with a friend who brought me to a lecture in São Paulo at 10 o'clock at night, and he went to a more far away part of the neighborhood, and he would stop at a traffic light with homeless people, and he said to call the people over to give candy, and I said, please stop, close this window, we're gonna close the windows until we get home. Oh, Heloisa, don't you have faith? Yes, I have reasoned faith. The spiritual realm is not our babysitter. Why don't you leave a lot of money on the dashboard? If you want to walk around like that with the windows open, that's your problem, but not with me. We need to know how to live. And the greatest lessons of life we find in Spiritism, because the individual is invited to reason, he's invited to detachment, not to slavery, because he knows that tomorrow or later, hopefully in 15 or 20 years, he's going to return to the spirit world. So it's a change in mentality and mindset, and in the understanding of the greater characteristic of Spiritism, which we are all students, apprentices. We can't worship the prophets or the mediums or the speakers, because nobody's better than somebody else. One has the gift of music. I love that conductor that make music, classical music, more popular. Pavarotti and Andrea Bocelli. Each one, as science says, has their own intelligence. And what more beautiful intelligence than parents who raise their children well? How is there better intelligence like this Brazilian businessman who used his fortune to help many people in Brazil who worked with him and anonymously? So why in the Spiritist realm the primitive horizon reign? Oh, so what if one is the medium, or I am that I am? Someone is a great carpenter. Wasn't Jesus a great carpenter? To show that it is not through this path that we're going to grow, that we're going to develop the art of living well. The invitation was to joy, to good humor, and the understanding that we can fulfill that which we want, but that we're always going to act with prudence to discover what we wish. And a characteristic of the Spiritist doctrine: don't worry, come whenever you can. Welcome. You came through a different route. Each one does what they can. But we can't find. Let us all united, joyful, and trusting in God with a reasoned faith, watching and praying, coming to get the moral vaccine, which in the Spiritist home, which lasts only a week. There's yellow fever going on in Brazil. So come and learn to smile. Learn to thank God. We need to know how to live, because knowing how to live, life is so beautiful. Even knowing that we are not afraid of death. Death doesn't exist. An example of a person that I know, not sure if they're Spiritists, and I received a material that I lent to somebody, and I don't remember who I lent it to. A book that a Jewish man, Dr. Moses, gave to me that talked about Spiritism, quote unquote, in the United States. So Dr. Elizabeth Rossi discovered this type of Spiritism because courageously, she was a doctor. She was in Switzerland, married an American, and she worked in the municipal hospital in New York. And it was the last place she wanted to live. She wanted to be in her hometown. The last hospital she wanted to work in. She wanted a more elegant hospital. But afterwards, she loved the experience so much because she did psychiatry to understand. And she discovered that many people in near-death experiences saw themselves in the room, saw themselves in a hallway, in a lit tunnel. So she started doing research. They asked them to tell in detail what they've done in these situations, so they told her. She would ask the doctors, did you mention this to them? Did you talk this? Was this instrument used? What medicine did you give? But how is this possible? The body was there, asleep. He couldn't perceive it. And they could see themselves in the ceiling. How is that possible? Parapsychology says, called this bioplasmic body. Kardec called it perispirit, but the Egyptians already knew about this. And so she went to see the body. She discovered in that experience that something survived the death of the physical body. So she was awarded, she had 18 different awards. But that wasn't good enough. Where do the ones that die go to? She began to discover in sessions of materialization one she loved. The spirit would communicate. There is no way. As she was attending those meetings, the meeting started to get full of people, and the medium became more vain and began to be unbalanced, and especially sexual imbalance. He discovered he was a man that had many women after him. So she went to talk to the medium and said, if you continue this way, I'm going to leave the meeting. You have to consider yourself as an instrument and work well. He threatened, and she left. When she left the meeting, many people left with her. There was an institute that she created. She said the children need to be loved. And the institute actually caught on fire. Could have been this gentleman, but she didn't want to go deep into it. She created another institute, and she continued to do the research and on other materialization meetings. This spirit used to go visit her in the hotel or in her home. So she, of course, had mediumship. She used to chat with the spirit. In times like this, she began to be rejected. This is a taboo. We can accept the existence of a spiritual body, but going beyond that, no. But she continued her work magnificently. And she used to say always, when they have a problem or a sickness, don't react with violence. Accept that in the end, everything will be solved. More than 75 years of age. She's not my age, I'm not going to tell you. She had many cardiovascular issues. Strokes, yeah. But she continued and said to her spouse, you can keep the mansion. I want to live in a little house in the middle of the woods. And the husband had already passed away, but her son said that she was able to walk. She continued being a happy woman. She was already also smiling. Her eyes showed intelligence. She was able to write somewhat, but she was able to be understood. She was able to leave the proof behind, the existence of the afterlife, the need to help the sick, but the ones that are going through near-death experience. We can't be inhumane with those who are in a state of need. We can't relegate them to the worst areas of the hospitals. We have to give them good positions. Try until the very last minute. And she left a great legacy, a message. We came to earth to help one another because we're all brothers and sisters. Because as long as one individual in the social arena suffers, all of us will suffer because we are telepathically connected to one another. Like the fish are in the ocean, like the lights in the sky. The connection of the lights in the sky. That Stephen Hawking said that when they meet, there's a huge black hole that forms. And so it goes into like a dance of energy that gets released, and it can form a lot of gold. So mankind's gonna go crazy after this gold. Life is beautiful. I'm going to close with a small passage. Heloisa, fala devagar esse trecho. She's gonna close with a poetry. There are two towns. One town is blue and gold. The sky is beautiful. The birds sing. The flowers enchant the whole town. And the other town is sad, dark, full of rats. There is pain. There is crying. The sun doesn't shine there. But the poet says, it's not two towns. The town is just one. It's two dimensions. Each one places himself or herself in the dimension that is his or her own. And may we be able to build through the characteristics of the Spiritist doctrine, that we may be able to build within themselves the golden and blue city in ourselves, that we may be able to build joy and happiness by the simple fact that we exist, and the courage to remain peaceful and serene in the moments of trial, because everything passes, everything transforms itself. But as brothers and sisters of Jesus, we continue. We are always assisted in order to achieve the desired happiness, the fulfillment of this beautiful golden and blue city, which we have already been able to conquer. A little room which is inside the Spiritist house we can commune in, so we can create the conditions necessary to project ourselves in this city of light. Thank you so much for your time.